And joining me now is former Vice President Mike Pence. Mr. Vice President, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you, Chuck.
Let me just start with your reaction to the Attorney General's decision to appoint U.S. Attorney David Weiss, who was an appointee of the Trump and Pence administration, his decision to make him a special counsel in the Hunter Biden probe. Do you approve of that decision?
Well, first, let me say, Chuck, I'm running for president because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. I think Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. But frankly, the pattern of the Justice Department during our 4 years in the White House and since has undermined public confidence in equal treatment under the law. And while I welcome the appointment of a special counsel, which is, of course, appropriate and is a minimum where the Attorney General has a potential conflict of interest, I'm also comforted by the fact that Congress is going to continue to do its work. I'm confident that House Republicans are going to continue to bring forward the facts in this case. The American people have a right to know whether or not President Biden's family benefited or that he himself benefited when he was serving in the job that I had as Vice President of the United States in a financial way from foreign nationals. These are facts the American people have a right to get to the bottom of. I am hopeful that Special Counsel Weiss will do his job without fear or favor, but I have confidence that Jim Jordan, Congressman Comer, and others will continue to do their job for the American people.
Look, I couldn't help but notice you had said that the Justice Department, even in the 4 years that you guys oversaw it, you thought also didn't seem to conduct investigations fairly. Why do you think this is? How is it that this is a bipartisan problem that you're identifying?
Well, look, it started in 2016 when James Comer gave Hillary Clinton a pass, right? That no other American would have gotten. But then what we found out since is the truth about what was going on during the Mueller investigation. You know, I lived through that for 2.5 years when we were busy rebuilding our military, cutting taxes, unleashing American energy, securing our border. All the while, we actually had FBI agents that were falsifying documents and pushing a political agenda within the Justice Department. It's one of the reasons why I tell people that if I have the privilege of being president of the United States, we're not just going to have a new Attorney General and a new FBI Director, Chuck, but I'm going to clean house on the whole top floor of the Justice Department and demand that we have men and women who are respected on both sides of the aisle as people of integrity who will apply the rule of law in this country equally to every American.
Look, I want to get to the indictment on the former president here, and a specific point here having to do with the elector scheme. Because earlier this month, you told a colleague of mine here that you didn't know a lot about the efforts to secure fake electors until after the fact. But it was interesting in your book, you brought up the fake slate of electors in a meeting with the Senate parliamentarian on January 3rd. In your book, you said this: I asked her a direct question, referring to the Senate parliamentarian. Are there any alternate electors from any state? She told me there were not. I mentioned that I had heard that some alternate electors had been sent from several of the disputed states. So this was on January 3rd. What can you tell us about what you knew about this elector scheme on January 3rd that prompted you to ask this question?
Well, I just heard what was being talked about in the press at the time, Chuck, but I thought it was important. Look, in January of 2017, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And under the Constitution, states certify elections. And while there were irregularities in states, maybe a half a dozen states around the country that changed the rules in the name of COVID, we challenged those in 60 court cases. Right. Once the courts had reviewed those and the states certified them, I wanted to make sure that we were operating on January 6th in a way that was consistent with the Constitution, consistent with the laws of the country. And that's the reason that I sat down with the parliamentarian. I looked through the process. I was determined to hear the objections that Republicans were planning to bring, Chuck, and many did bring. Right. I mean, you remember Democrats brought objections to Electoral College votes in 3 of the last 4 elections that Republicans prevailed. There's nothing unusual about that. None of it, but I did ask the parliamentarian.
Under the law.
I did ask the parliamentarian very directly, Chuck, I asked her because I was hearing rumors. I was reading in the newspaper that there were alternate electors. I asked her point blank.
Was anybody in the White House telling you this?
From any state? And she said there was not. I don't recall that. I just remember hearing it in the public. And I wanted a definitive answer whether or not the parliamentarian had received any additional electoral votes. She had not. So as you know, we actually changed the language as those electoral college votes were recorded. But look, you know, Chuck, I've told you many times, I said it again at the Iowa State Fair. I had no right to overturn the election. The Constitution is quite clear. As vice president, my job was to preside over a joint session of Congress where the Constitution says the electoral college votes shall be opened and shall be counted. And
let me ask you this.
I did my duty that day.
Donald Trump had said this week that he never asked you to disregard the Constitution and that he never said that you were too honest. Either of those things true?
Well, look, you could check his tweets, I think, on the day of, the day before. I mean, the president was quite clear and quite public that he thought that I had the authority to either reject or return votes to the states.
So you stand by the too honest, that he said you're too honest. You stand by that remark?
No basis. I do, Chuck. I mean, it's part of a dialogue that happened between the president and me, and that was related, I think, to a bogus lawsuit that was brought to try and force my hand to have a federal judge say that I had the right to throw out votes. Look, there's almost no idea more un-American than the idea that any one person could choose which votes to count for President of the United States. The American people know, as I heard from dozens of people at the Iowa State Fair, Chuck, the American people know the presidency belongs to them alone, and no one person has ever had that authority or ever should under our system.
Were you surprised that Mark Meadows was not listed as a co-conspirator? Because you had told me, and you mentioned in your book, you thought he was leading the former president down this path on election interference and all the different things and all the people he was bringing into the room. Did it surprise you he wasn't on this indictment?
Well, Chuck, I don't remember saying anybody was leading it. I remember saying there was a group of crackpot lawyers that the chief of staff allowed to be in the Oval Office that, frankly, should have never been allowed on the ground.
You told me you didn't think the chief of staff served the president
of the United States.
Yeah. You had said in
That's
various
exactly
ways.
what I just said, Chuck. I'm happy to repeat it. Look, the chief of staff's supposed to be a gatekeeper. You're supposed to make sure that people that are getting into the Oval Office have the credibility to be there. And frankly, this group of lawyers that were allowed to counsel the president to tell him what his itching ears long to hear is that I had some right to reject votes or return votes to the state. There was no basis in that in history, but. You know, look, Chuck, I think our Constitution is more important than any one man or any one man's career, including mine. I took the stand I took that day because of that oath that I took. And I couldn't be more encouraged, Chuck, as one person after another, not just in Iowa this last week, but in New Hampshire the week before. More and more Americans are coming up to me and expressing their appreciation for the stand they took. They know I chose to keep my oath to the Constitution that day, and if I'm president of the United States, I always will.
I want to ask you, though, you're very careful in what you talk about, whether Donald Trump's a nominee, whether you can support him again. If you thought he violated the Constitution, how can you support Donald Trump again for president?
Well, Chuck, what I've said is I'm happy to meet the criteria for the upcoming Republican presidential debates. I'm incredibly proud that more than 40,000 Americans in just 9 weeks have supported our campaign, made it possible for us to qualify for the debate stage. And in fact, Chuck, I think I'm actually going to qualify for the second debate before we get to the first one, because more Americans are seeing that my consistent conservative record, my years as vice president, my years as a governor here in Indiana, my years as a House conservative leader for 12 years are are really just what the nation needs. This is no time for on-the-job training. This is no time for distractions. We need leadership on day one.
Do you consider yourself
that'll be able to provide the team and the vision
Mr.
to
Vice
turn this country around? And I can.
Do you consider yourself a MAGA Republican?
I'm incredibly proud of what we did in the Trump-Pence administration for 4 years, and you better believe it. In those 4 years, after 8 years of the slowest recovery since the Great Depression, 8 years under Barack Obama and Joe Biden that saw military cuts that hollowed out our military, 8 years of liberals on our courts. Under the Trump-Pence administration, with the support of MAGA Americans, we literally did make America great again.
Do you feel like you're a MAGA Republican or not?
That pandemic struck. And look, I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. I've always said that. Yeah. People who know me know those are my values, those are my ideals, and I really believe that the agenda that I've always been about, that I'm looking forward to taking to that debate stage, is the agenda that'll bring this country all the way back.
And believe it or not, I do want to try to ask you one question about something you did this week. You rolled out an energy plan. The Wall Street Journal, I think, was complimenting you by characterizing it as drill, baby, drill. A, do you accept that as a compliment? And B,
yes.
Do you think the government, though, should play a role in trying to find renewable energy to replace fossil fuels at some point? It doesn't sound like you think the government should play that role.
Well, look, gasoline prices jumped back up this week. Remember $2 a gallon, Chuck? I sure do. That happened under our administration. We unleashed American energy. It was an all-of-the-above energy strategy. We achieved American energy independence in 3 short years. Joe Biden launched a war on energy on day one. He shut down the Keystone and Dakota pipelines. Energy prices, gas prices are still up 60%. Electricity prices are up 25%. We laid out a vision following on my plan to tackle inflation. We laid out a vision this last week, not just to achieve energy independence. It's one of the things your colleagues over at the Wall Street Journal neglected to mention. I also believe not only can we achieve American energy independence again, but I believe with the right policies going forward, we can reclaim our role as the leading producer of energy in the world by 2040. It'll take leadership. It'll take a commitment to American energy independence. On day one of a presidency that I'd be privileged to serve in, we'll fight to restore that American energy strength and leadership and dominance in the world.
Former Vice President Mike Pence, sounds like you got a night at home, which is rare on the campaign trail. I'm glad you did. Be safe on the trail, and we'll see you on the debate stage.
Thanks so much, and Chuck, I appreciate you having me on.
You got it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.